We got a lot going on in Washington, and we have an anniversary that is certainly poignant.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
I can't believe it's a year. Hashtag DStrong. Is there anybody on the planet that didn't know what that was all about? We are going to revisit the ongoing campaign to continue to bring attention to the challenges that Dorian had and the things that we can do to prevent that terrible disease. And the book that we highlighted last year is still in circulation, and we want to remind you of that. So stay tuned. We'll meet Mom and the author of the book and have a good conversation. Nice to have you in. Thank you for joining me on this program. What day is it? It's Wednesday. It's the middle of the week. Is it hump day? All right, it is. You know, some days are more of a challenge than others. I think we all can relate to that. Donald Trump certainly can, or we can, and the folks in Europe certainly can, because the breakup is absolutely no turning back, they say. In London, headlines and news stories reflect that very sentiment.
Oh, here it is.
The 7-page letter initiating divorce proceedings between Britain and the European Union was signed, sealed, and delivered to EU headquarters in Brussels. Prime Minister Theresa May says her government is acting on the democratic will of the British people 9 months after they voted to break from the European Union.
This is an historic moment from which there can be no turning back.
Negotiators will now have 2 years to hammer out terms for Britain's split with the EU, including future trade agreements, travel regulations, and the right to live and work within the remaining 27 EU nations.
We are going to make our own decisions and our own laws. We are going to take control of the things that matter most to us.
But across the EU, the loss of a major player is unsettling, and some analysts say it could prove to be destabilizing.
There is no reason to pretend that this is a happy day, neither in Brussels nor in London.
The battle over Brexit was brutal last spring, when voters narrowly chose to leave the EU.
For me, it's definitely a sad day. I think it's better being together, and I was really shocked by the results.
I think that the people have spoken in the Brexit vote, and you have to bow to the will of the people.
Britain is the first country to leave the EU in its 60-year history.
It's, I still think over the 2-year period of time, there might be some Brexit remorse. The closer you get to the finality of the arrangements, the more clear it is that there was a lot of emotion and maybe not a lot of woohoo going on in making this decision. So, can never go back? We'll see. Most likely not, but what global warming? Really, that's kind of the question that Donald Trump would ask, because he's rolled back a bunch of EPA standards here, as the headline reflects. Trump signs order rolling back Obama's anti-global warming projects, and we have the latest from CBS on that.
I am taking historic steps to lift the restrictions on American energy, to reverse government intrusion, and to cancel job-killing regulations.
President Trump made history of the Obama administration's efforts to curb greenhouse gases. By signing an executive order at the Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Trump took the first step toward erasing rules limiting carbon dioxide emissions from coal-fired power plants and easing restrictions on new coal mines.
My administration is putting an end to the war on coal.
Industry workers joined Mr. Trump for the event.
You know what it says, right? You're going back to work. That's right.
Coal mining accounts for roughly 50,000 jobs in America, down from its peak of nearly 180,000 in 1985. Automation and the availability of natural gas from hydraulic fracturing has made coal production less competitive.
We're here to announce the single most important step America has ever taken in the fight against global climate change.
When President Obama created the Clean Power Plan, Mr. Trump is now reversing. Mr. Obama emphasized the need to tackle rising global temperatures.
No challenge poses a greater threat to our future and future generations.
But President Trump once called climate change a hoax, and his EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, recently denied a direct link between carbon dioxide and global warming.
So no, I would not agree that it's a primary contributor to the global warming that we see.
In 2016, the Supreme Court blocked Mr. Obama's Clean Power Plan after more than 20 states complained it exceeded federal law. Mr. Trump's order on Tuesday instructs all federal agencies to suspend or revise any rules he believes unduly burden domestic energy production.
Well, look, we all want jobs, and we all like to see a burst in the economy, and if that comes from energy, that's fine. But the idea that there's a war on coal is kind of interesting. There's a technological war on coal as well. In addition to the environmental concerns, as the story noted there, natural gas and other technologies have kind of carved out a piece of that market share. And I'm wondering whether we're just kind of chasing a chicken here, trying to regroup on coal when it may have been a day gone by when it was an important primary source of energy and economy. Never mind the environmental issues that go along with that. I hope this is more in Donald Trump's instinctive wheelhouse than everything else he's been working on so far. All right, next item. Coming home here, the politics of 2018 are beginning to percolate in 2017. Here's a front page story that has a lot of people talking in the Providence Journal today. Robert Flanders, former Supreme Court Justice, is eyeing Sheldon Whitehouse, which I find to be fascinating. Bob is a blue chip candidate in my mind. Does he want to exhaust his reputational capital to take a flyer against Sheldon Whitehouse? We have Sheldon's picture here. I don't think he needs to be introduced. Oh, we don't. Oh, I thought we did. But anyway, the point here is that both Sheldon Whitehouse and the other play in this, Bobby Nardolillo, a Republican who is a state representative, known for his family's funeral home business, he also is suggesting that he's going to run against Sheldon Whitehouse. So you could have a primary with Flanders and Nardolillo to play off for a run against Sheldon Whitehouse. Now, most folks would think that Sheldon Whitehouse would have to commit a heinous crime in order to get beat in that seat, just based on the way the politics are embedded here. Flanders, much more than Nardolillo, presents a real uh-oh for Sheldon Whitehouse, and we'll see. This could be very, very interesting. And a power play in the state Senate. You don't screw around with the new bosses here. Dan DePonte in East Providence, the state senator, put on his Facebook page that he was punished because he dared to rustle up some feathers and potential support for being the replacement for Dominic Ruggiero, who was the majority leader in the Senate and is now the Senate president based on Teresa Paiva-Weed's exit stage left to become an executive with the Hospital Association of Rhode Island. DePonte, right there, I guess, made a mistake in exerting his own First Amendment rights to say, hey, I'd like to be the majority leader. He got whacked and thrown off finance because, we all have to be rowing in the same direction, says the new Senate president. Translation, you're on my team or you're off my team, because that's the way Rhode Island politics is. It's ridiculous. We'll invite the Senate president in here momentarily to see if he's got any kind of, level of sophistication in running that branch of government. All right, it's a year. Look at this headline. A year after Dorian's passing, his D-Strong legacy lives on, and here's the book that has really kind of told the story. We have both the author and mom here today. I cannot believe it's a year.
I know it.
How are you?
Doing okay. Yeah, the past year had some big ups and downs, very emotional, but we made it through the first year, which I imagine is the hardest, I hope is the hardest, and doing okay.
Anniversaries are weird, aren't they?
They are very weird.
Are they necessary? Do you feel like, this is a continuum of all that you're dealing with?
Yeah. I think they're important. It depends on the meanings of them. There are so many anniversaries that we passed. His birthday, the D-Strong Day, the book coming out, his passing. They all have different impacts and have a different emotional value to me. Sometimes I wish we could just skip over the day and just be done with it.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about just keeping the story alive. Stay with us. So Walt Buteau updated this saga for us.
Many of Dorian's sentences had a bigger impact than this one.
I'm just thinking before I go to heaven to try to be famous.
Among the countless he inspired, author Nicole Cannella.
And I was drawn to that little face.
Her sister was diagnosed with cancer.
Stay D strong.
As D Strong was blazing across the internet.
I stopped and I watched the two of you engaging.
What do you think would be good about being as famous as you can?
Because then I can get lots of girls.
What?
Girls.
Girls.
I loved his humor.
Trust me, I'm 8.
I loved his wit.
I have my birth certificate.
And his candor.
It is very, very tough. It is very tough.
You feel like you were guided to Dorian somehow.
Yeah, 100%.
She contacted Dorian's mother about writing a book to help children fight what Dorian fought since he was 4.
And that meant everything.
Nicole remembered how this rock-tough 8-year-old responded to a question about how strong he was.
And he said, I am.
I am.
Sort of the tiredness, I think, a little bit in his face.
Everything we have to go through, it's just a lot.
And his words were woven into one stanza about when it's impossible to be strong.
And on days that I cannot, my mom or dad, they hold me tight and say my back they've got.
It's really nice to know that so many people have my back for me.
The title is Leaving a Mark, as in the mark Dorian left, and the mark cancer leaves.
The bumps, the bruises, losing your hair.
The needle, all the meds.
Just the marks that they leave on your body.
When she finished the manuscript, she brought it to Dorian.
I was very nervous to
Why
read
were
a
you
book.
nervous?
To read a book about cancer to a child who is staring it in the face.
He read it.
Don't be afraid.
About 11 days before he died.
Always believe in yourself.
He wrote the foreword that, like Dorian, was wise beyond his years.
And he said, don't be afraid. You can be a champion too. Always believe in yourself and never give up.
All right, well, I'm all done.
Yeah, I know that clip it's so powerful, and every time I still see it, it just it touches my heart. Hearing his voice and hearing him joke the way that he was with Walt, I love it. It's wonderful.
So Nicole is here. This is almost like, well, it's been a year since you've been back here talking about the book. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. It's your show. I mean, what do you want to do here? What do you want to tell people?
Just that the book is still available, Leaving a Mark. Nicole and Dorian worked together on it so hard, and it's such a beautiful book. And it seems to be inspiring a lot of children, and not just cancer families, but children and families outside of the cancer world that are looking in, that were a part of the D Strong movement. And the buddy system, the buddy book system that Nicole put into place has been really amazing. So people can purchase this book and donate it to another cancer family so that that child can have a copy of this book and read it and maybe find some hope and some comfort in knowing that what they're going through is normal and what they're feeling is okay.
How have the sales of the book been?
They've been good. They're slowing down a bit, and that's important that we keep the momentum up. I think that my and Melissa's passion is to not only earn money for the causes that will instinctively, all of the money will be allocated into good foundations like Dorian J. Murray Foundation, trusted pediatric cancer nonprofits. But also we want children to hold the book tight to them and know that there's something for them when their parents are being inundated with literature about pediatric cancer, that they're not as afraid because there's something for them that they can then wrap their mind around and know that there's a little boy who knew exactly how they felt. And it's emotional, so you can probably tell there's a little bit of emotion right now in my voice. I think watching that package, it just brings back a lot. But we want the momentum to stay going forward, that yes, this is something that was inspired by her amazing, incomparable son, and that his words are indelible and in ink forever, but that we want all of the little children that are out there fighting right now and scared and unsure to be able to hold something that that resonates with them.
Well, what is it about you know, I haven't read the book in a while. I read it last year. What is it about the book that provides this sustenance or courage or
I think it's in the words. It's not covered up. It talks about the needles, and it talks about bruising, and it talks about how the medicine makes you feel sick and how they want to throw it away, and sometimes their kids feel angry and they want to shout up in the air. So it's a book about realistic cancer life. It's not making it pretty, it's just showing it how it is, and I think it's relatable for children who are going through a diagnosis.
Since last year and since the publishing of the book, I'm sure that you've heard from plenty of people who have been moved by it. You have anecdotal evidence of that?
Yeah, a multitude of anecdotal evidence. To be honest, there were days where I personally wanted to just kind of go fetal, and you know, I told you last time that I was here. I'm a person of faith. I'm a woman of faith, and I asked to be used. You know, to use what skills I have, however limited, to do good. And when you pray it, you know, you better be prepared for what comes. My grandmother used to say, "Don't pray for patience," you know, because if you pray for patience, you'll be tested. I prayed to be used, and so in the you know, consequentially after the book came out, I was contacted by many families whose children were dying, or who have died, and I thought, I'm not strong enough for this. And then I would think of her, and I would think of the mothers who actually lost children, and I would think, you know what, enough. You know, you can put your little anxieties about this at bay and put it aside, and you're going to do what you were called to do, and that is, you wrote a book about strength and courage, so you're going to get up and you're going to be strong and courageous. I've met children from all over. There are children in China who hold this book who used to look up to Dorian when he wished to be famous in China. There are children in Australia that have one eyelash left that their parents are photographing for posterity, and they have my book, our book. That part of it's been a bittersweet endeavor. As far as celebrities championing the cause, that's been mostly sweet. We have people that are of huge heart that were D-strong before the book came out and are remaining so, you know, posthumously. I don't know, they might show some of the pictures, but we've been able to meet some tremendous people. There's a woman named Rachel Platten. She's a singer, Grammy-nominated singer, who she wrote the song Fight Song. And I was told in my journey throughout this year from a lot of cancer moms that Fight Song was their anthem for their children and for them. And for Rachel Platten to hold the book and say specifically to the Murray family, I got you, I'm still with you, I hear you. This time around talking to you is more emotional, to be honest, than last time. Mostly just because I'm so amazed by Melissa and by these parents that have the fortitude of faith to keep going. You know, my calling is to write books of faith and hope, and that's what I hope to continue to do.
Yeah, last year, we were the world was caught up in this D-strong effort and the notion that Dorian wanted to be famous. A year later, what does that famous objective mean now? Stay with us. You know, the D-strong movement was incredible.
Yeah.
The momentum was unbelievable. And when Dorian said that he wanted to be famous, it was so charming. At the same time, you know, I'm always, the critical might not be the right word, but observant, sometimes judgmental about the 15 minutes of fame world that we live in here, right? And social media and the like. And of course, you know, who am I to say? I do a television and radio show for a living, so I got to be careful with that. But it was always this kind of question that I didn't ask last year that was in the back of my mind about the objective to be famous. Did he have a special brilliance about what the famous part would actually bring? It wasn't just about him wanting to become famous on a deadline.
Right.
Did he have an instinct that the fame had such a bigger meaning than just his own personality?
It's a great question, and I've pondered that quite a bit. You know, he was such a smart child and very much an outside of the box thinker, and I have questioned, did he know on some level that this could inspire so many people? I never expected the D Strong movement to take off the way that it did, but maybe he knew something that we didn't. You know, maybe he just had an agenda. He always wanted to help his cancer fighters, his fellow cancer fighters, his friends, and so maybe this was somehow his way of igniting that fuel to
But you
them.
never had that specific conversation with him.
No, we
He
really
just,
didn't.
it was cute, and it was a catch fire type of thing, and he was ill, and
Right.
everyone just kind of rallied behind it. But I'm sure in the back of a lot of people's minds, we're trying to, what is the value of this urgency that he had to become famous? And he may not have articulated it, but there's something about the brilliance that you see just in the everyday taping that he would, and Walt's package and the like, that he must have known instinctively that it was way past him.
Yeah, that it was making a difference.
That's what hooked me, was two things. One was that he said, I am. And I think we spoke about this last time, is that is God's name, I am. And that really moved me. And the other was that when you're facing down mortality, whether you're 8 or 88, I would imagine, I've never faced mortality like that, that you want to know that you'll be remembered. And because he was such an old soul, and we've talked about that he was advanced beyond his years. I mean, when you're sick at 4, you learn to be a young adult real quick, like he did.
Well, all the kids that I've met, you know, at Hasbro, and the maturity level that disease and having to deal with it brings is
Right.
uncanny.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
consistent and uncanny.
And when you talk to adults that are in hospice or facing, you know, end of life, you want to know what your proverbial footprint was. What did I do? You know, and that resonated with me as somebody who wanted to use my skills. You know, what can I leave that's actually going to leave a mark that people are going to remember? And I don't know if he thought that all through. I mean, being 8, I have an almost 8-year-old. But there was something about it to me that spoke volumes about knowing that now the world knows me, and maybe that means something, and I don't think it was for naught.
I'm guessing you still talk to him every day.
Absolutely. Every day at 8:28, I talk to him, talk about our day. And
8:28 p.m.?
8:28 p.m. It's the moment he passed away. And so every night, my alarm goes off on my phone at 8:28, and I take a moment, regardless of where I am, and just say a hello, and I hope you're happy in heaven. And I say every night, I hope you don't miss me the way I miss you. And just share my day with him.
No, it's not. It's not an easy topic. It's not easy.
Buy the book, will you? Just buy the book. Go online at foxprovidence.com. We'll show you how you can buy the book. The book's available.
Lampianpress.com, then we can be sure that all of the royalties are allocated to the right place, but
Right.
you can also get it on Amazon.
All right, Amazon, but get it the other way. And check foxprovidence.com for that. It's good to see you.
You too, Dan.
I wish
Thank
it was
you.
a better conversation, but it's a great conversation.
Right.
In the same,
If
in
we're
the same
making
way.
a difference, and it's a great conversation.
That's right.
8:28. Be right back. Yeah, I can't miss the momentum on buying the book. Again, foxprovidence.com. Go right to the website and link in to be able to make a purchase of Leaving a Mark. And boy, did he. And something tells me he knew exactly what fame was going to bring, and it wasn't about his ego. Have a great night. See you tomorrow. Bye.